Dobre. Oh. Hey everyone, can you hear me well? Or, yeah, okay. So today I will have a quick lecture about UX design as part of the product development cycle. And first I'll introduce myself. My name is Stanka, and for the past 4 years I've been working in Scale Focus as a UX UI designer, and I've been working mostly on B2B apps. Before that, I had the privilege to work for Infragistics, where we were building Angular component libraries. My part there was as a UX architect, so I was working with the developers on the specifications of each component and how they are built in the entire system. And before that, I was working on website optimizations, A/B testing, surveys, mostly websites. So this is my background, so that you know who will be speaking. And this is the contents that we're going to run today. We'll start with what is UX UI, so that we could have a basis of what we're talking about, its role, the process that UX UI designers implement during the development process, and how that is done alongside our developers and the other side of the team. So I'll ask you if you have any idea, like, what is UX UI? Like, raise of hands. You have heard it, obviously, but can you define it for yourself, like at least slightly? Can you raise hands, if you can? Okay, great. That's awesome. Are you completely sure what that is about? Like, can you raise hands, like super specific? Yeah, great. So we have people that know what it's all about, but I'll still run through that because there are other people not really sure about it. So the easiest approach that I've found goes alongside my colleagues is by comparison. So we've all seen graphic design everywhere around us. If we take a spoon as an element that we want to represent, a graphic design representation of a spoon would be a picture of it. Like it's hanging there on the wall. It might be pretty, but you can't use it. It can bring you joy if it's like a really cute one or something. If you want to represent the spoon as a user interface element, then it has its form, it complements it, and you know you can put it into some use. So it's a physical form of it. And then if you want to add the UX part of it, then you know you could use that spoon and it would reflect the function of eating a soup with it. So the spoon will actually work. And now, these are really nice, you know, super simplistic illustrations, but I would like to show you how it would look if it's like more physical one. No, okay, this is the spoon, like graphical design, definitely oil on canvas or of some sorts. You cannot use it. It's a nice bluish shade. Then if you want to see the user interface, then we have like this spoon. It has its own material. It could be wooden. This one is metal. It has some nice incrustations. It definitely is something that is not 2D only. So it could be usable. And the fact is that most of us can actually put it into use. They could, you know, eat soup with it. But the UX here is important because it defines who actually uses that product. And that spoon, in some cases, might look like this. And this is a spoon that is used by people who have tremors. So it's important who exactly you're designing for. And, you know, I'm not sure if this is like an actual product or just a concept, but it's how it might look, and it's different from the picture and the UI and everything around that. It can also look like this if you have, you know, gums to chew on. So the UX is definitely about who the user is. And if we go back to the digital world, no more spoons, we would have, the UI is what the user sees and what the user interacts with. This is what we see, the colors, the branding of the product, the interactions, the nice animations that go with it, the typography. And then the UX is usually what the team during the product development cycle and the UX and the stakeholders, this is what they're kind of building, the structure of it. It could come out as information architecture, as user flows, as functional requirements if you want, user personas, like strategies, things that the user has never and will never get access to. There is a nice comparison, like the UX is not what you're going to meet, it's the UI most of the time. But without the UX, the UI would be really gooey, sorry. And I'll go back to the physical for a little while, because sometimes the user interface is pretty straightforward. We have a cup. This one definitely looks like a cup that you can drink of. You can pour liquid in it. And it's really, cute. It has ears and a nose. So it's nice. You could put liquid in it. But at the end, things might happen like this. And this is like one of my favorite examples, because it really illustrates that sometimes, even though, it seems pretty straightforward, it might not be. And this is where the role of the UX UI designer comes. Because what we are trying to achieve is, find out what the user needs are. Like in this example, that guy is really thirsty and wants to have a sip of any liquid. The business goals, I want to sell a lot of cups that are cute. And the technical constraints that would be ceramic ears won't just magically disappear when you lift up the cup, right? So we need to have like a nice interception of all those so that we could define what would be the best decision that we make before we send that order to China for 100 cups. And how we usually do this and why it is important to implement it. I think we figured out why it's important to follow the process, and now let's talk a little bit about the process itself. It's a non-linear one, so it's not, this follows that and this is the end of it. It's basically we try to empathize with the user. We try to define what they need. We try to ideate on how we can help them. Like in this phase, it's like, let's make 1 cup of ceramics with those ears to see what would happen. Then we prototype that and we test it. So we test that cup with the cute ears and see what would happen and if there are any major issues with it before we proceed to development. Because during that phase, it's important to know before we use any of our resources and spend time and money that won't be really necessary. And this was the general idea of what we're doing. Then in details, it's something like that. It's like a lot of information on one slide, really not user-friendly. But the idea here is to show you like the whole process, and then I'm going to talk a bit about each step of it. But generally, the development process is a process. It's a never-ending story until the product is alive. That's the whole idea of it. And in the beginning, you can see that there are design roles. Basically, from the beginning, it's mostly UX methodology involved. And then the second part could be more UI and UX at the same time. So the first phase is basically finding out what is it about. We perform stakeholder interviews, we perform business interviews, we define the goals, user interviews. We try to see if any other people are making cups and how they've done it before, because well, sometimes people are trying to discover the hot water, but it's not really always the case. We try to do some competitive analysis with similar apps, if there are any. In B2B cases, it's really hard because you don't have access to such information. And that's why the other thing is really important, to focus on the users that you have in the business. Try to gather any qualitative or quantitative data from what they're daily doing. And on that basis, we create the following actions. We create user journeys, we create personas. I don't know if you've heard of them, but the thing that gets to the developers and the team most of the time is the wireframes. So the wireframes are like the basis of what will come up next for development, basically. At this point, it's important to test the wireframes and the flows that you have with potential users, if you have any, so that before proceeding with the UI, where you could see, you know, the form, the colors, and everything else, you have avoided any major issues within the flow of it. So the UI design is, you've seen it, style guides, icons, typography, the content is what the content it should be. And when that is done, we usually hand it off to the developers. And in this phase, what the designers are generally doing is we are working with the developers alongside on whatever happens. It's a daily communication. Usually the design is never done. I mean, it cannot be done because the requirements are always changing when the users or the stakeholders are actually seeing what's happening, or there are unexpected things that might happen during the development itself. So this phase is important for us to work on the changes of the design that might be happening in the moment, and to assist the development team with any resources or ideas that might come up. And then we have the implementation. When we have the product ready, what we are doing next is testing it with real users. And that's the best part, because you get the users and you actually are able to validate the initial hypothesis of the whole process that you've actually done so far. It's a really important phase because from that phase come the goals for what happens next. So when we turn the circle around and we validate, okay, we can see now that the ears are not such a good idea, we should probably do something else with them because they're not working, or anything alongside that. And I want to talk a bit about user personas and the deliverables that you might come to. When we have, like, for example, B2B projects and we are dealing with a specific set of customers, the idea is to interview those, to identify who the main roles are. And in the method here, we're trying to appoint a specific person, their goals, their needs, and everything alongside that in order to be able to empathize with them when we're doing the prototype. So we're trying to pinpoint exactly their needs. Something else that you might, and you should probably have seen, are the wireframes. This is the place where we are setting up where we have what. Like, for example, on top we have something circly, probably an avatar. Below that, titles, some scrolly, some carousel going on, and something below that. So we have that, but we don't know the exact position, we don't know the exact colors, we don't know the exact content what would go along with that, but we have like a general idea how it would look and what would the content be. And this is enough for this phase in order to validate it with whether a stakeholder or a user. Then what we proceed is actually high fidelity design. It's pretty much the same, but now we have an actual image. We have all the, we have, you know, the hamburger icon, we have the settings icon, we know what exactly will go in there. We have the exact size of the title. We have the little cards here and the login and the sign-in, it's all very specific, and that's when it would go to development. But that would go to development with a bare minimum of a style guide. A style guide is the thing that should go with any high-fidelity design. It's like a little design system that is not interactable, but it would show you every element in the product that you're designing and each of its states. Like if you have a button, it would be, of the field button, how it would behave on hover, how it would behave on select, how it would look if it's disabled. And that style guide would provide the consistency throughout the entire app. Furthermore, at least in my experience, copy, pasting, working with any digital form of tools, sometimes people might make mistake. And you could copy something, it might not be the right thing, and then the developer gets the design and starts, whatever they see, which is the most normal thing. But you might have copied the wrong color, you might have done something, or you might moved anything. So this is the place where the developer and the team should set on, and this is what all the components that should be used. So it's a really important part in before the development starts, basically. When we have all the components set, when we have all the designs done, what we could do and what we usually do is we prototype them. We link them all around so that they actually look like the real product itself. And this is a really good time to user test that as well, because now the app looks, if it's an app, presumably, now it looks like the real one, so close. And this is the time when you can see if you've had any major leaks into your hypothesis and actually try to avoid them somehow. And this also adds more work for both parties, but it prevents more in the future. And now that we have everything, let's say we've done all the testing, we've done all the designs, we've done all of it. Now we have to hand it off to the developers. That's usually done by handing it off with one of the most popular apps. It's like XD. Here you could see that there is a tab on the side that would provide you with information on what are the distances between the elements. You could switch to different values in order to export them for what you would need. The other app is Figma, and here you can also export depending on the value that that is needed for your project. And these are pretty convenient for all of us, but does not solve all the things that can be done. Most of the time it really looks like we're handing off the designs and you can never hear of us ever again. And this is really a bad misconception, but really depends from project to project or coach or company. And it's important to know that the designer should be available during the entire part of the process and what follows next. I mean, these are nice, you can use them, and it's preferable that you use them, but there are a lot of other things that might and will, for sure, go wrong, or you'd have questions for that, and that's where we need to be in. So the process sometimes might look like this, but it's important to have it like this, so that it's the hot potato graphic. But it's basically from the start of the project till the end of it, you're expected as any other part of the team to connect with everyone and to discuss what our goals are and what each one of us is doing. Most of the times the designer it's important to inform the developer of what they're thinking of, what the wireframes are looking even before they got to the client. And sometimes the developer might have even better idea how to process that depending on the technology. So it's a really important thing, and it does not look like this. It definitely looks like this, and it should go around the whole team. And since we're in the technology world, it's always changing and developing, and it's important to have the communication as the most important part of our work. And since I was talking so much, I would like to thank you for your attention and to thank my colleagues from Scale Focus that also added their value to the presentation, and to invite you to ask me any questions that you have.